How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Brainsmasher. Let's do another 4 album reviews, shall we? What do you say? While we talk about these 4 albums, you and I back and forth have a discussion, debate about these squares full of depravity. I'm going to be listening to Until Death Overtakes Me. The album is Prelude to Monolith. I'm really glad I was digging around in my CDs. Every night I do that. And picked this up and remembered, holy shit, I haven't listened to this in probably 10 years. I've got 2 of their records on CD, and I can't remember which one I like more. But I put this one on, and so far, it brings the Birtles. It brings the Dooms. It's so just vast and desperate and depraved, and I kind of thought it fits along with a couple of those albums that I'm going to be reviewing here. So I think they're Russian, and this came out in 2003, originally on Firebox Records. Firebox puts out a lot of good stuff. The thing is, I think they kind of get ignored because they don't seem to distribute or advertise outside of Russia. So worth checking out if you're into some kind of looking for some new oddball Russian doom stuff. So the first album I picked out to review, and I picked it out because I referenced this quite heavily in my review of the Suffering Hour album, which I listened to again today. So this is F.L. Duath's Hemmed by Light and Shaped by Darkness. I had thought that I had done a full review of this or something on my channel so far, and I'm surprised I hadn't, because this is one of the biggest discoveries of the last few years for me. It's something that I just kind of keep pondering in my head. It's an album that challenges me continually and satisfies me at the same time. And I have a really interesting relationship with this album, and I don't really have much of a relationship, I guess, with the rest of this band's material. Maybe I should get into that, but I feel like the culmination of the band's style really ends on this swan song of an album. This is their last Meisterwerk. Is that what Meisterwerk means? I'm not sure. But so if you don't know about F.L. Duath, it's an Italian band. Started out, I think, as a solo project. Doing some kind of oddball, experimental sort of solo project black metal, which inexplicably, I feel, got signed to Earache Records right away, and immediately found some success with a couple of decent full lengths that I used to have copies of and used to kind of like. I quit paying attention to them, especially after doing an album called Songs from My Dog's Brain or something like that. I don't remember. It's a concept album about being a dog. So you can imagine why I didn't really care about checking in with this band. But for some reason or another, I wound up checking in with them a couple years later, and Karen Crisis sings on this, for one. I don't even think I've ever heard Crisis, for that matter. She sang in like a hardcore kind of group called Crisis back in the 90s, 80s. I really couldn't tell you. But her vocal style is super interesting. It's gruff and gravelly, and like she kind of meanders between these sour notes and bad, like poor singing, but also she is using notes to sing. So it's kind of like, it's this weird off-putting sort of emotive kind of style that kind of comes off sort of witch-like, and it's just super interesting, and it pairs so well with the guitar work on here, which I think is the centerpiece of this album. It's super serpentine, twisty, and unending, and just meandering sort of riffing. I swear nothing is repeated on this album, it seems. Once you like a riff, you better fucking listen up, because it's gone in a second. It's just like that over and over and over. Not repetitive, but it just feels like you're constantly being pushed through this weird maelstrom of nonsense. It's just a super interesting kind of progressive metal album. And finally, the drum work is none other than Marco Miniman, who plays on Necrophagist's Epitaph, most notably. So he's super, super skilled. player. So like the three of those players on here, I feel like is really a amazing team to be making this super oddball kind of music. And it just doesn't really fit in with anything else. Comparatively, it's not necessarily black metal or death metal or prog metal or anything. It really is its own thing. And so after Efeldoath did this last album, Karen Crisis then did a project called Karen Crisis's Gospel of the Witches. They did one album on Century Media. This one is on Agonia, if you're wondering. And that one is... it really takes off where this album left off, being its own kind of project, but taking upon those ideas a little bit more heavily, a little bit more vocal oriented. But I think this guitar player is also on that Karen Crisis album. I think they're married or something. So check this out. I really recommend it. It's just such a fascinating album. That's all I have to say there. Next, so I got this in the other day from none other than Count Blogathor. Famous YouTuber. This is Utstat with Hurungavagar, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I think I am, pretty much, with his label Celestial Oak Productions. He is down to his final, 10 copies or so of this, or less. So if you haven't yet, get your hands on this for the cheap. I think it's about $10 or so. So I had been kind of hemming and hawing about this, about getting a copy of this forever and ever. Finally decided to pull the trigger, and I'm kind of glad I did. But I gotta say, after putting it in, there's one big fucking fallback caveat to the album, and I don't know if I'm the first one to bring it up or say it, but the fucking snare drum on this thing is just right there in your fucking face all the time, making the otherwise really good music kind of hard to enjoy. So I hope at some point there's a remix of this album where the drums are lowered in the mix about 50% or so, and then the snare is taken down maybe 75%. It's computerized drums, which I don't have a problem with. It's something really along the lines, style-wise, of like Caladan Brood or something like that. And it's really well written, atmospheric, symphonic kind of American post-black metal, really influenced by stuff like Summoning and all that kind of stuff. Reminds me quite a bit of, I guess, of Eldamar too. But man, if I could just stab that snare drum in the guts and make it a lot quieter, that would make it a whole lot more enjoyable. So yeah, that's that. Next, so I'm kind of pimping this for my friends at Bind Ruin Recordings, but ultimately you are the benefactor if you decide to buy this amazing album for $6 mere. It's a double CD by a band called Seder. And the album is called Ganunga Gap. And this came out in 2013, and I think everyone involved has always been really scratching their heads at why people didn't go absolutely apeshit for this, considering the fact that Austin Lunn of Panopticon is the main guitar player. No, not main guitar player. He's a guitar player. He's the vocalist and the drummer. And this is him as in a three-piece band. This is my buddy Wes, and this is my buddy Adam playing bass. And so hearing him in a full band atmosphere is really interesting. And they have conceived a limitless, amazing doom metal album. So I don't know. I cannot stress enough how important it is that if you consider yourself a fan of Panopticon whatsoever and you don't have a copy of this already, you're really, really fucking yourself over. This is super enjoyable, abysmal, and just the breadth of this, the scope and the breadth of this record is just so absolutely infinite. It allows the band to have these build-ups and have this the ebb and the flow that Austin's projects like Panopticon are able to achieve, which just really draw you in so much. The sheer vast atmosphere that happens upon in this record just makes it such an immense and intense listen. You've got to be really patient about it, though. It's not something where you're going to put it on and blast you away. There's lots of intros, lots of instrumentation, lots of spacey, synthy kind of stuff. And this is an album concepted about space in the cosmos. This is one of the few records you'll find that Austin is involved in where the lyrics are included, so you can dig deeply into that. There's all different kinds of stuff going on here. It's one of the most beautiful Doom records I have ever heard. It sits right there along with bands like Shape of Despair, November, stuff like that. Great stuff. And it's on sale right now from Bind Ruin for $6 mere. You might as well pick up some other stuff while you're doing that, but I don't know why you wouldn't get this for $6. Get it now. Also, if you're holding out, I don't believe this is ever going to be released on vinyl. And if it is, it's going to be shortened by quite a bit because this album is very, very, very long. In order for it to fit onto 2 LPs, maybe even fucking 4 LPs, I'm not sure, but I think the idea at least originally was to put it on 2 LPs, but they would have had to cut about 13 to 18 minutes of material from it in order to fit it onto an LP. And seeing that people fucked up a lot and didn't wind up getting the CD edition very much, I don't know, it may be a long time before it's on LP. So get it, do yourself a favor. Speaking of depressing depravity, we have This Empty Flow with Magenta Sky Code. I was kind of surprised when I looked this band up a few minutes ago just to kind of refresh myself with the facts that this band is not on Metal Archives. And I guess, it kind of reminded me that this is really not a metal album. But after Thurgathon did their one and only album, Stream from the Heavens, they broke up, and 2 of those members went on to form This Empty Flow. That should give you a little bit of an idea of, again, the vast breadth and scope of the atmosphere that these guys are working with. However, style-wise, this borrows quite a bit heavily from bands like The Cure's Disintegration, maybe even a little bit of Slow Dive going on here. It doesn't necessarily sound like those bands, but if you are into The Cure's Disintegration at all, or Slow Dive, this is most definitely up your alley. It's got a real 90s sort of dated sound picture to it. The drum machine on it is kind of lovable, but also kind of cheesy in a way. But it doesn't really necessarily take back from the effectiveness of how depressing this album really is. Track 2, Useless. Man. It's some really great stuff. It also kind of, I guess, reminds me, if you were to take some emo bands and just slow them way down, put tons and tons of infinite delay on the vocals, you would have something quite a bit like this. In fact, somebody put together, so this band broke up right after this album came out in 95, I want to say. And they did album with there's a couple of songs that were like unfinished that they were working on for their next record, along with some demo material or something like that. And it was called Three Empty Boys, which is a Cure song album. I'm not sure, one of the two, but if you're a Cure fan, that's a Cure reference. I'm kind of talking to you, Mike Seatown, right here. Get on this stuff. Anyway, so that's 4 album reviews. We'll see you next time. Thank you for joining me. And if you haven't subscribed, what the fuck, man? Come on.